Welcome everyone to our town hall session with Judge Calloway, who presides over our juvenile court. Welcome, and we are looking forward to a great conversation with our judge. For those of you on the call who have questions for Judge Calloway during the course of this conversation, if you'll use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions, and I'll make sure that they are asked of Judge Calloway. So we'll go ahead and get started. Judge Calloway, I'd like to start with a broad question about how the juvenile court has been adjusting in light of the very unprecedented orders by our Tennessee Supreme Court.
Oh, I love to start off with that broad question. I could go on for days about this. Juvenile court is a little unique to the other court systems in Davidson County. First and foremost, we have a staff of about 125 people, which includes court officers, probation officers, administrative assistants, the ones that do the intake petitions. And so we have a huge staff that we are all working each and every day to make sure that we are doing the service that we need to do for our community. We are primarily doing skeleton crew that are rotating so that not one person has to be here each and every day. But we are still operating. We have court hearings every day at 9 a.m. and at 1 p.m. Our 9 a.m. cases are any emergency neglect and dependent petitions or any emergency parentage petitions, visitation issues. And then at 1 o'clock, we do our detention docket every day. I will say, on behalf of all of the children in our family in this community, that our detention dockets have gone almost non-existent. For instance, there have been no arrests over this weekend, and so we do not have a 1 o'clock docket today. So woohoo! Kudos to our kids. I think that says a lot about just if we have safe, secure placements for our youth throughout the city. I've said this all the time, when they're in school, they're safe, secure. When school's in session, they're out of school and parents are working or parents are out, they don't have anything constructive to do. That's when they find time to get in trouble. So I am always glad to say that the children are not getting in trouble during this COVID time. They're staying in their houses. They're doing what they're supposed to do. We have a few here and there that are not necessarily on board, but the majority of them are doing well. But anyhow, we are running dockets. We are taking petitions. The clerk's office is still open, so we're taking motions. The biggest thing is we close now at 3:30 instead of the usual 4:30. So if you need to file anything, it would need to be down here before 3:30. We are doing phone conferences on some of the cases that people might think are emergencies that may not really be an emergency. We are doing some phone conferences. There are 10 judicial officers. We were not equipped before this happened with everyone having laptops and the ability to use WebEx or any type of Zoom for our court hearings. And so we've been a little behind the schedule for other court systems who have been able to do more of the Zoom, WebEx type of court proceedings. We will have a limited number of our magistrates using WebEx starting this week. We all have a training tomorrow, and so we will be able to do more of that. And that mainly was because of a resource issue. We didn't have it before. We are I think the stepchild of the court systems, and when resources get handed out, we usually get them last. We're the last to have, or they're going to have e-filing. We're the last that are going to have a new building. We're the last to have any type of electronics in our courthouse. And so even, in a city like Davidson County that you would think most of their court systems are up to date on the kind of things, we were not. And so this has affected us tremendously, not being able to do some of the things that some of the other courts are doing. I sometimes hear comments about attorneys making that type of comments on their social media pages about how come juvenile court's not doing this? How come they're not doing that? We did not have the capability to do it. We didn't have the equipment. We didn't have the laptops. We do have laptops, but again, I have a staff of 125. I have about 40 probation officers. All those probation officers have laptops. And so we're not going to take them from the staff that need them and are actually in the community. They're still seeing their kids. They're still doing visits. They're not going into homes now. They're going by the homes, having their child to step out on the porch and wave at them to make sure that they were still checking in on them. And so, you know, the laptops that we did have were in use by other parts of our staff. And so it was a matter of reallocating some of the resources, getting some of those things in, and getting us all trained. And so that will start up on Tuesday, hopefully. That's a nutshell.
Judge Calloway, you mentioned that you are still having 2 dockets a day. Are all of those, it sounds like some maybe are being handled by telephone, but some are being handled in person. Is that correct?
So the only in-person things we are doing are the 9 o'clock and the 1 o'clock, and they are all emergency or detention cases. And so if you have an emergency case, such as a child needing to be removed because they're being abused, then we will hear those at 9 o'clock. Those are primarily our Department of Children's Services cases. Occasionally we'll have, you know, relatives or somebody who knows somebody's being neglected or dependent or abused. Those cases we do hear in person at 9 o'clock. And then the 1 o'clocks are for the children who are in detention. Also, if you have or had a child that was in detention and had a trial date that was set, we are still hearing those as well. So anything that deals with our children that are in detention, we are definitely still hearing those cases in person. And so the out of person or the by phone or telephone conference, hopefully WebEx soon, will be the ones that are not emergencies that we can hear right away. We have a safe baby court with Jerice Glanton is the magistrate. She's been holding her normal safe baby dockets on Fridays by WebEx. And so we were able to get from the Department of Children's Services, I think, and the AOC, were able to go ahead and get her connected for her to continue with her normal docket. So she's doing the safe baby court every Friday. And then Magistrate Calhoun, who does our recovery courts, they have been having their recovery court meetings with the clients, because we know that, you know, part of recovering from any type of addiction, you got to have that connection with other people. And if you don't, if you're feeling alone, that is one of the tell signs of relapsing. And so it was important for us to keep that connections and those things going. And so Magistrate Calhoun and his team are still doing meetings and their staffings and everything with their clients, both in our adult recovery cup as well as our juvenile recovery court as well.
For the proceedings that are happening in person, what sort of measures are you taking to allow for social distancing?
So my warrant staff is doing a great job, and they're lining people up in different places of the courthouse. And if anybody's been down here, you know, it's probably one of the hardest places to social distance, because we have no waiting rooms. We don't have any waiting areas. We have some benches that are outside of the courtrooms, but they're not the best if it gets crowded. And so we're making intentional efforts not to bring in everybody at the same time, to place people different places. We are encouraging people who come in to wear masks. My warrant office, along with the cleaning crew, the custodial staff, are cleaning on a regular basis. Every time I look up, somebody's spraying handles. But we're doing the best that we can to follow all of the CDC guidelines and make sure that that if you come in the building, that you are healthy and that you stay safe, and that we provide as much social distancing as possible.
What about for the children who are in detention? What measures are being taken to prevent the spread of COVID-19 there?
So the company that we have that runs our detention center has done a great job of coming up with a pandemic plan. They have and there's several things that are going on because of I guess the numbers of kids coming in has declined tremendously. We have the ability to have one pod that is completely empty. And if anybody is showing any signs of coronavirus symptoms, then they would be placed in that pod, as well as anybody that comes into the intake area. They go to that pod first before they go into the general population. And so we want to make sure that no one's bringing it in and nobody's taking it out, or just keeping everybody isolated. They are doing temperature checks on a multiple basis for all of the staff. Whenever the staff check in, when they check in, if they go out for lunch or they come back in, each time they come back in the building, they're required to go through a additional screening and temperature check, plus the questions that they're asking. If you call the hotline, the same type of questioning. They're doing a temperature check on all the youth as well on a regular basis, and doing a lot more extra cleaning as well. And so, being in a type of detention facility, prison settings is difficult to manage during a crisis like this. And so they're going over and beyond, making sure that each person that comes in the building comes in healthy, and that they leave out healthy as well. They've even changed the intake process. So when the police bring them in for processing, the police don't come into the building now. They stand outside in the Sallyport area and do all the intake outside, so that there's no contact with the police any further than what needs to be. So they're doing a lot. It's unfortunate. There's a facility that they also run in Memphis where there's been a bunch of youth and staff who have tested positive for coronavirus. And so we are on top of trying to make sure that that same type of thing doesn't happen with us here.
Great. I want to take a quick pause just to remind everybody who's on the conference, if you have a question for Judge Calloway, please use the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your question, and I'll make sure that Judge Calloway gets the question from you. Judge Calloway, there's been obviously a financial impact on families because of COVID-19, including parents losing jobs. And I'm wondering whether you're seeing any increase in particular types of cases, for example, on your child support docket, or any other types of issues where you're just kind of seeing increased activity because of that impact.
We are definitely seeing a lot of filed petitions for modification. Unfortunately, those are not emergencies, so we're not able to hear those at this point. But I would imagine that those definitely have to deal with the fact that people aren't working now. I have about 40 probation officers, some that work with adults, some that work with our juveniles, and each one of them are reaching out to all of their clients and making sure that they have basic necessities, whether it's food, clothing, housing, and we are still connecting them with some of the nonprofit agencies that we work with, and connecting people to make sure that they're getting all that they can at this time period. We're making sure that those kids that need to eat that are getting connected with the school schedule, and the schools providing meals and making sure that they get there. We're doing as much as we can to keep them connected with people in the community and agencies in the community that are able to provide the things that they need. And then, when we start up dockets again, maybe back in June, hopefully, some of the petitions to modify, we will be able to hear those and make sure that we're doing what we can to provide any necessary relief for the people who've lost their jobs.
I was going to ask about potential backlog because of this. If you're only hearing emergency proceedings right now, do you have a plan, or what kind of insight can you give us on how you're going to deal with the backlog once we can be in person again?
Absolutely. And I have to give a big shout out to Lionel Matthews, our juvenile court clerk, and his staff. They're doing an amazing job of setting aside the cases that aren't emergencies and keeping a good track of the numbers that we have coming in, and helping us to be prepared when it's time to start the dockets again. We are still, if it's a case that's not an emergency, but people are entitled to attorneys, we are going ahead with the appointment process, even though they don't have a date to set the cases. We're at least getting them attorneys appointed so that the attorneys can reach out to their clients and hopefully reach out to the other side and see if there's anything that they can work out prior to us having an actual court date. And I want to stress to all the attorneys that we will take any agreements and settlements. We can do those by phone or hopefully by WebEx at any time before they have a court date. So they don't have to wait on an actual official court date to settle a case. We'll take those settlements. I will say last week we probably, over the time period, we've probably had about 100 new filings for the whole court, which actually is not that bad when we looked at the numbers and looked at the type of filings. There were some of the cases that we have been able to do. I have a petition for special guardianship for those youth who are trying to apply for a special immigration status. We are still holding those dockets. We just do them by phone. And so those were a lot of the filings that I've had. We've had a lot of motions to withdraw or motions to dismiss cases. The magistrates that get those are definitely hearing those by phone and by hopefully by WebEx tomorrow. So we are able to do some of those limited type of cases now and to get those taken care of. So when we start back, we have designed a system where Magistrate O'Neill, who's what we call, I refer to as our emergency room docket, or he does all the emergency rooms and all the initial appearance dockets. The first couple of weeks that we start back will just be most of the new filings will be set on his dockets, and we're going to make new dockets for him to do the appearances, and so that we can figure out, if this is something that needs to go to another magistrate, or does it need to go to the judge, or can we resolve this right now? And so he will be busy for the first couple of weeks of trying to get through that backlog and making sure that we're getting all the cases. We will, when we get back, in order to do social distancing, we will be staggering our dockets. And so there will be no more than 3 to 5 cases per 30 minutes if it's a settlement docket or if it's a motion docket. And so it's really, really important. And I want to get the word out to all of the attorneys that when your time says 9:30, your time is 9:30 to 10. And so if you have a case that you think is going to require a lot of argument, a lot of testimony, then that is going to have to be reset to a date that we can put it by itself and not with the staggered docketing. So the staggered docketing is going to be used in all of the DCS, neglect dependent, private party settlement cases, all of the motion dockets, all of the delinquency dockets will be on a staggered basis where we're only bringing in per courtroom about at the most 5 cases at a time. We're doing that because we don't have waiting room space. And so we're having to reestablish what our foster care review board room is going to be, a waiting area. We can only wait up to about 15 people in that area if you're looking at social distancing and being 6 feet apart. So we're super limited. And so we can't have our massive dockets that we used to have, like starting at 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock. So it is super, super important that attorneys learn early that they can't double book themselves and say, well, I can be in Magistrate Lewis's and judges at the same time. That's not going to work for the schedule that we're going to have. And so if you get a time slot of 8:30, make sure you know that you're there from 8:30 to 9 o'clock and don't accept another case or another time slot until 9 o'clock, and so that you can finish your business with one magistrate and go to the next one at 9 o'clock. We want to make sure that the people coming, the clients understand that as well. But it's super important that we stick to those time frames so that we're not overwhelming our system and that we're not having a whole lot of people in the courthouse at the same time. So we're literally looking at any given time in the main courthouse, 8 magistrates going at the same time, or 8 judicial officers, that includes me, 8 judicial officers at the same time. And if each one of us has about 5 cases, and each case has about 2 people, we're looking at 180 people in the building at the same time. And that's pushing it. And so we want to make sure that we're not over going 180. We've gone through all of the courtrooms and seen how many people can sit in a courtroom with including court staff. at the tables, the attorneys and their clients, and we've mapped out how many people can actually fit in there with social distancing guidelines. And it's not a large number, it's a very small number. And so we've got to make sure that everybody is staying on top of it. And I've said this to myself and to the magistrates that we got to be on time. And so if I say that things start at 8:30, we got to start at 8:30 because I'm only going to give you a 30-minute block, then that's all you get. Then I've got to be there at 8:30 as well. I know sometimes I have that problem where 8:30 might mean 8:45 or 8:50, but from starting when we go back in June, it's 8:30 will mean 8:30.
I know you talked about some of the technology struggles that you have in juvenile court because of limited resources. I do have a question from our audience about whether or not attorneys or clients will be able to attend hearings or trials via video conference if they're hesitant to come into the building. And I guess that would apply now or in the future once we get back to some more in-person proceedings.
So now we can definitely do video conferencing once we get it all set up. Depending on the type of court hearing, we definitely are encouraged by the Supreme Court. And I encourage all the magistrates as well, so that we don't have as big as backlog, to do as much of the court hearings as we can by video conferencing. Once the courthouse does open up, we would have to take it by a case-by-case basis. There are some cases that we talked as a group that there may be a lot of evidentiary exhibits and things that need to be a part of the hearing. And if there's objections to exhibits coming in, how do you do that by video conferencing? And we have not found a good solution to that. And so those types of cases that we know are very contested, that's going to have a lot of documents, we will probably have to require the parties to come in on those type of cases. On the other hand, cases that are a little more simpler, that are only contested on a few very minor issues, and no one's attempting to present a whole lot of documentary evidence that would have to come through a fax or however we would get it through electronic means. Those types of cases we would definitely consider opening up and doing more video conferencing. I will say, for instance, the Safe Babies Court usually has a number of team members that attend the court hearings, and that's the reason for Safe Babies Court, is you want the team to be there with the family and the child. We may be limiting the team members' participations in person and having just the parents, the child, the attorneys, and the essential people, and then the other team members may be able to participate by teleconference or WebEx. And so we're looking at all of those types of options to make sure that we are, number one, keeping everybody healthy, following the CDC guidelines, and doing the best safety and health for our community that we can, but also getting the cases heard and making sure that people are getting the justice that they want.
Are you, or do you anticipate requiring people to wear masks or gloves while they're in the courthouse?
So I anticipate my staff, while they are out in the hallways with the clientele coming from the street, we do anticipate them wearing masks at that time. If they're at their desk, then that's up to them. But if they're out in the public area, then they would be required to wear masks. We are going to encourage the people that come into the building to wear masks. Our hope is that we have some people who will donate some masks for us. We are having a meeting with some Metro Department representatives, are meeting with all Metro departments to talk about how we get resources for masks in order to hand them out to our clients. If we have 180 people come through the doors at one time in a day, and the masks that we've been given by Metro, or that we paid for as part of our department, we would not have enough to last 2 days worth. And so we're asking that people, if they feel like it, donate. We had one of the attorneys, Annette Clark, has donated a lot of masks for us to use, and so we will be handing those out when people come through the door so that we can encourage them to do what the CDC is asking us to do.
The Tennessee Supreme Court released a new order on Friday, and as I read the order, it allows judicial districts to come together and submit plans for reopening sooner than June, or at least allowing some in-court proceedings beyond the emergency proceedings. Do you know if there's any plan for that in our judicial district, and including for juvenile court?
So we have reached out to Warner Hassel and Tim Townsend with the other court systems here in the court administrators. And we are all, looks like we're going to try to come together around Wednesday to have what our plan would look like. For us in Davidson County, if we can start a little early, we would like to. The issue with that is I'm not sure, like if we turn in our plan at the end of the week, how long will the turnaround be for the Supreme Court to say, yes, you can go forward with it? And if they say yes, if it takes a week for them to say yes, then how do we get people notice of their court hearings being set? And so it may be easier for us just to start June 1 with, being able to notify people that, yes, we were going to start. If we can do some hearings, I had originally said May 18th would be great. But if we're not approved by then and we cannot get notice to people to come to court by then that's a different issue that we'd have to deal with as well. And so it may be that we just cool our jets and just wait to June to come and start at that point. Usually we have what we call trial weeks where we don't have settlements and don't have a lot of people coming in the building at one time. And we do trial weeks on weeks that there are holidays. And so there's that, believe it or not, we have a holiday coming up. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but there is the Memorial Day holiday. And so in my mind, I'm thinking we should definitely have our plan approved by that May 25th date. And so maybe having some smaller motion dockets or smaller trials that were already set that last week of May, in my mind would work as well. But we probably won't be able to really start fully until that first week of June.
I'm going to remind our participants, if you have any questions for Judge Calloway, please pose them. I do have at least one question I'm holding on to Judge Calloway for in a few minutes, but just want to give those who are on the line another opportunity to ask some questions. Judge Calloway, any of the changes that you've made in response to the coronavirus, do you anticipate that any of those are going to continue into the future, even once we're out of the woods?
I do. I have always thought for a long time that our mass dockets, where we have 1,000 people, it feels like, coming in at 9 o'clock and at 1 o'clock, were ineffective. And you get people that have court hearings at 1 o'clock and they get here early and they get here at 12:30, and then their case doesn't get called until 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And they're just sitting in the hallway, probably getting a little bitter and frustrated by the court system because why do they have to sit so long? And there's no rhyme or reason whose case goes first and whose goes last. And a lot of times people get very frustrated. So I've always said at some point that we needed to kind of revamp how we do our settlement dockets and our motion dockets so that everybody's not coming at the same time and waiting forever. And so this is a prime opportunity for us to do it. And so I'm really excited about moving to scattered. I'm excited about moving to staggered docketing. And so that I think will help us with just the general population that comes through. If anybody has ever been here, particularly like on a Monday afternoon or a Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon or Wednesday afternoons, you would see how crazy it can get down here with the number of people that we have hanging on the side rails and, trying to find space to even walk, 2 steps in front of you when it's just completely packed. And so until we get our new building, this will be definitely a thing that we will do where we stagger dockets and have people coming in at different times. I hope that lasts for a long time.
Prior to the pandemic really becoming a reality here in Nashville, we had a devastating tornado and storm event Did you see some fallout in your courts because of the tornado? And then did COVID-19 add any kind of complication to dealing with those issues?
We definitely saw a lot of effects from the first tornado and then the COVID-19 virus. First and foremost, I had staff who lost homes. One of my staff members lost everything. And then we had another of my staff member, her mother-in-law lost everything. And we've had a lot of staff that were hit. One lost her car, and the list goes on. So we had at least 10 staff members who were directly affected and hit by the storm themselves. And then we had a lot of our youth and our families that were actually hit as well by the tornado. And so, we were in the midst of collecting and, collecting items and being part of the recovery efforts and doing those things to help our staff and our families and the children that we serve. Then all of a sudden we get hit with the virus, like everybody else in the community, which kind of sets it back as well. So we definitely have a lot of children and youth and families who have suffered double whammies or triple whammies, and that need a lot of services. And that's why it's really, really important that we are keeping connected with them. We're calling them on a regular basis. We're going by their homes on a regular basis. We're keeping them connected with the community agencies that we partner with so that someone has their back and someone can really support them through all of these issues that we're going through.
Is there anything that attorneys could be doing better to help your court function during this, interesting time, I guess I could call it?
The one thing I ask for most attorneys is just that practice on here on a regular basis. Just be patient with us. Be patient with us as we make through our changes, as we go through everything, trying to figure out how to do the technology, how to get the laptops that we can be able to do WebEx. I know it's frustrating from an attorney's position that, it just seems like they should be able to do this. They should be able to do this now, when there are some things that we just actually can't. And so be patient with us. And it's going to be of utmost importance when we go back is that they follow through on the guidelines of the timing. Be really cautious about double booking and when you set your cases, and making sure that your clients understand that they have to be there and they have to be there on time. We really have got to make sure that we're moving people in and out of the building so that we can keep everybody safe and healthy. And so, and if anybody wants to donate gloves, masks, we will definitely accept them. We were more than happy to pass them out to as many people that we can encourage to use them. And we believe that that's a important part of safety for our community as well. And so we would definitely love any type of donations that you might want to give us.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions from our audience. First, are you seeing emergency petitions from parents who are upset that their co-parent isn't following CDC guidelines closely enough?
I'm not sure if we're getting that as much as we're getting emergencies of people cutting off visitation or parenting time. So we've gotten a lot of those cases where parents don't want to get, school's not in session, so he only gets them when school's in session. We're getting a lot of those type cases, and what we're hearing them if we think it's an emergency, if we think it's not necessarily an emergency, but it's something that needs to be heard prior to us setting cases back in June, then we're hearing those by phone. And it's what we're telling, the attorneys, or we're telling the people that file that you need to stick with the schedule that was given, regardless of whether school's in session or not. Stick with the same schedule. We're not changing schedules. It is super, super important that the youth that we serve have continuity in their lives. If you think about how crazy and how sometimes just unsettled we are as adults going through, first tornado and then COVID-19, and how, we're trying to find avenues to relieve stress and to see people, and, coming up with different, ways to do electronics and all these things that are going on in our heads as adults. And it's hard for us to kind of really put all this in words of how we're feeling. Just imagine how it affects a child whose brain's not fully developed. You know, you can imagine if we're struggling, a 13-year-old child or a 6-year-old child who just doesn't get, why am I not going to school again? Why am I not seeing my friends? Why can't I do these things? It is difficult for them as well. And so we have got to make sure that the parents understand continuity in their life at this point is so much more important than anything. So much more important than our bitterness that we have for each other, our concerns that we have each other. Well, he's not wearing a mask all the time. It's okay. Let the child see him. The child needs to see their dads and their moms as often as they can during times like this. That helps to build resiliency in our kids, and resiliency helps us to get through trauma. And so this is traumatic for us as a nation to go through just a total change of lifestyle, the way that we are. And we've got to work with each other to build up our resiliency for everybody, but particularly our most vulnerable with people which are our children.
Another question from our audience. You mentioned there were no arrests this weekend. Have things slowed down in that respect since COVID-19 started?
Definitely. We have definitely seen a decrease in the number of kids youth who are being arrested for detainable offenses, let me say that. And so it is definitely something that, we want to stress. I think it's when our youth are home with their children and our families, it helps. And so we definitely are glad that we're seeing a constant decrease. Now, I will say, over the years, we've seen a decrease in juvenile arrests overall. And, we had numbers from 2013 down to recently or last year, where we could see that there was like a 30% drop overall, but my court administrator is in here giving me notes. But in the last 8 weeks, we've seen a 40% decrease in the number of youth arrested. And that is just amazing. That makes me smile.
Is there anything else that lawyers who are practicing in juvenile court that you think they should know at this point in time?
Absolutely. If they have any concerns about what we're doing, about the ways that we're doing things, if they have suggestions, we are open and we're willing to do it. We're presenting our plan, and I think we're trying to get our portion of the plan to Judge Binkley by Wednesday. If you have concerns, suggestions, complaints, please just reach out to our court administrator, who is Kathy Sinback, and you can find her on our website. I'll give her cell phone number because she doesn't care. She gives it to anybody. It's 615-310-7132. She is more than willing to talk to attorneys to see how we can make it better for everybody. We actually have a little small working group of attorneys that we put together that she's already met with or getting ready to meet with, I think, in the morning, to talk about how they fit into the plan and make sure that we're giving them 30 minutes to hear a settlement case. Is that enough? Do we need to things that we may not be thinking about from the attorney perspective? And so there's a small group of attorneys that she's going to meet with by Zoom to make sure that we got their concerns in line. So if you have questions about how we're going to conduct and what our expectations for attorneys are, or you have good suggestions that we can actually do, please just contact me or Kathy Sinback, and we'll definitely do what we can to make sure that we're taking care of our attorneys as well.
Great. I'm going to give our audience one last opportunity to ask any questions, and then we're going to bring the town hall to a close. If you have any last questions, please go ahead and submit them. Okay, Judge Calloway, I've asked just about every judge, I think, that's participated in a town hall so far, if there are any silver linings that they can find for us in this situation, or if there's anything in particular that they are grateful for during this time. So I'll ask you the same question.
Awesome. So, there's a lot that I'm grateful for in this time. I have had a little extra time with my family. Yeah, I'm grateful. I have personally slowed down tremendously. I think most attorneys who practice here know they see me coming and going like the breeze. I'm usually at some type of breakfast meeting, then running to court, cutting cutting court short so I can run to some lunch meeting, coming back, and then going that evening doing something. And it's any given day I'm going from 5 a.m. to about 9 o'clock at night. And so I have found my home and my bed, and it's been very comforting. And so I'm enjoying this kind of downtime. I'm actually catching up on the 2000 old emails that I've never had an opportunity to answer. So if I send you an email from something you sent me a year ago, just charge it to my heart. I'm charged to my head and to my heart. I'm trying to catch up. So this has been a good time for us really to, get back to the basics and to think about the things that are so important to us and our health and our families and taking care of one another. And so, I just want to close with a little song for you, Laura, just because you always ask me that. But I think it's so applicable because, this is difficult for us all, but I know that in the end, we're going to survive. So I would have been singing this on Saturday at the Casa Ritchie party that we missed. We went viral instead. And so unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity, but now I have a platform. And so I just want to say, first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong, and I grew strong. I learned how to get along and saw your back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I'd known for just 1 second, you'd be back to bother me. Boy, now go. Walk out the door. Just turn around now. You're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with goodbye? You think I'd crumble? You think I'd lay down and die? I will survive. I will survive. Woo-hoo!
I'll clap for everybody.
We are all going to survive this. We're going to survive. Thank you all.
Thank you, Judge Calloway. I can't think of a better way to end this town hall. We appreciate everything that you are doing for our courts and for our kids, and for sharing your time with us here today. And with that, we'll end this town hall.